Alrighty, we are on to week 133 of World War II, March 13th, 1942. Tumbling capitals, MacArthur on the run. So he's finally fleeing the Bataan Peninsula. Bataan? I don't know how to. Words with double A's in them like that, I can never do it. For the YouTube audience, please do let me know how audio is. I feel like I've found the right balance between mine and videos, but if not, need it louder or whatever, let me know so that I can try and adjust and we can find the right balance again, because I used to have it balanced. Now I don't. I have to refine it. Let's dive in.
Wait, the Emperor said they're eating fruit too quickly. Fruit? Who? Okay, the Japanese. Yeah, but oh, are you really sure that's what he said? Okay.
Gotta avoid scurvy.
March 13th, 1942. It was less than a month ago that Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, fell to the Japanese, and this week they take another major prize. This week comes the fall of Rangoon.
Telling me the crab ran this goon.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week saw coastal raids on France and Marcus Island, an air raid on Australia, and the Japanese invasion of Burma continued while landings were also made across Java in the Japanese campaign to take the Dutch East Indies. This week on the 12th, the Dutch forces formally surrender the Dutch East Indies to the Japanese at Bandung on Java. Some 100,000 Allied troops are taken prisoner. The Japanese were by no means unwelcome in the East Indies. The Dutch, unlike the French, had never found the knack of tempering colonial rule by offering cultural and intellectual equality to a subject people's educated class. Educated young Indonesians, as they were shortly to call themselves, responded readily to the message that the Japanese brought co-prosperity, as they certainly brought liberation from Dutch subjugation. The Japanese are moving against even more targets this week. Already the 8th, they land in New Guinea, beginning their advance on Port Moresby and Australia. By this date, the Japanese had also attained a number of other objectives.
Why are they being so successful here, but they just cannot replicate the success in China? Is it just because of the Chinese numbers? Like, there's just so many Chinese soldiers? Like, is that what's going on? Like Japanese are doing so good everywhere else except like China, really,
Of their initial plan.
and all the Philippines. So I guess it's when they have a significant army opposing them, they just do not do good. Is the vibe I'm getting.
They had landed on the east coast of New Guinea, and striking south from their bases in the Mariana and Caroline Islands, had moved into the Northern Solomons, and perhaps more important, the Bismarck Archipelago, which included the best harbor and most important base in the area, Rabaul. This series of barely contested victories gave the Japanese the southern and southeastern anchors of their projected defense perimeter, placed them in an excellent position to threaten Australia, and did so at what looked like very little cost to themselves. Not only all that, this week the Japanese take Rangoon, the Burmese capital. British General Harold Alexander leaves Rangoon the morning of the 7th, okay? He heads north, and the road forks like 35 kilometers north of the city. To the east, the road goes to Pegu, and to the west to Prome. The Japanese have now blocked the western road. We saw last week that they'd sent the 33rd Division north around Rangoon as their 55th went to Pegu. This means that Allied headquarters, the 17th Indian Division, and the 7th Armored Brigade are all cut off. But the Japanese don't know that. And Alexander's forces outnumber the Japanese defending the roadblock. But Alexander doesn't know that.
Oh, God.
Small units sent in to attack the roadblock are pushed back, but that night he orders the 63rd Brigade, backed by the 7th Armored, to attack it early the 8th. If the attack fails, his men are to break up into groups of 12 men and to try to make their way north. Well, I said the Japanese didn't realize their fortunate position, and they are exhausted and short on supplies after the march north. So they pull back in the night, and the 63rd finds the roadblock abandoned in the morning. So Alexander's army escapes,
Oh.
and the Japanese 33rd makes it to Rangoon, reaching the governor's house at 10 a.m. They enter in force over the next day. Over half of the population of Rangoon has already left the city, though, mainly in February. The Allies will now have to fight their former base city. Rangoon is the only major port in Burma as well, so all Allied supplies to Burma must now come overland from India. The AVG, the American Volunteer Group, the Flying Tigers under Claire Chennault, have relocated to Magwe, a small British airfield some 500 kilometers north of Rangoon. The Tigers have done very well the past couple of months, consistently taking down a disproportionate number of the enemy,
Hell yeah.
but themselves being whittled away by attrition.
Hell no.
By this time, the AVG and the RAF have only a few dozen planes left between them.
Ooh, that's not good.
In the northern part of Burma, Chiang Kai-shek has the Chinese 5th and 6th Nationalist armies. On the 11th, American General Joe Stilwell is put in charge of them. In terms of numbers, these are the size of European army divisions. They are near Mandalay and the Shan states. Britain's India commander Archie Wavell had, as we saw, rejected Chiang's offer of troops to help defend Burma. And what Chiang now has there are not enough to defend what's still unoccupied. The Australian division rerouted from the Middle East was briefly hoped to go to Burma, but at the unbending insistence of the Australian government, it's gone home. The Australians believe, and it's a fairly understandable belief, that home defense is their top priority at the moment.
And I agree.
Stillwell was appointed American commander of the region last month. Vinegar Joe has spent time in China and knows the language at least somewhat, and he's pretty efficient. He also has, however, a lot of prejudices against a lot of people. He doesn't think much of Chiang Kai-shek. As the top American in the region, though, he's chief of staff to Chiang. He commands the U.S. forces in China, Burma, and India. He's the U.S. representative on Allied war councils, and he supervises Lend-Lease to China. He is confident that the Chinese soldiers of the 5th and 6th will perform well under him. But that combat-experienced Chinese officers might not simply kneel before a foreigner who had never led a unit in combat at any level above the platoon did not appear to occur to Stilwell's superiors. Stillwell has met Chiang several times by now, and they have several conferences this week. Things do not go well. They do agree that they need to retake Rangoon, but they disagree very much on how to do that. In Japan,
well, at least they found common ground somewhere. Progress.
Japanese news, March 9th is the date that was set for the completion of the first operational phase of the Japanese offensives, now marked also by the capture of Rangoon. Emperor Hirohito says, "The fruits of victory are tumbling into our mouths too quickly," to the Lord Privy Seal. This is because there are a couple of issues to solve with such large conquests in such a short time. Tokyo's military-dominated government had limited strategic planning to the first operational phase, which had only set a timetable for the conquest of Southeast Asia. Now that this had succeeded, the pace and magnitude of their victory bred complacency and overconfidence among Japanese leaders. Japan does now, in very much fact, have an empire that is rich in both food and raw materials. Plenty of oil to fuel Japan's industry, most of the natural rubber the earth has to offer, 3/4 of its tin, a major chunk of its rice. As for those issues to solve, one is how to secure the defense of the new empire and bring about peace with the U.S. You'll remember that's always been the plan, to take an empire and secure it so that it would be too much of a hassle to fight and bring a fait accompli to the negotiating table with the U.S. But perhaps more important, how to not just administer, but first pacify all these new territories so as to actually make use of all these raw materials to make Japan even stronger. Japan does not, for better or for worse.
Japan seems to be thinking more long-term than than the Germans, at least. Like they're both pretty short minded. Um, the Japanese seem to, at least the way this show has been presenting it, the Japanese seem to be more long term minded.
Have the colonial experience and bureaucracy of the European powers that they are replacing, and they are planning on securing their gains with the Imperial Army. I cannot say just how this will work out, but in Manchuria and China, this has completely alienated the local populations,
Yup.
which isn't too surprising since this is the definition of martial law. We saw a few weeks ago the treatment of the Chinese after the fall of Singapore, where many were imprisoned or brutally murdered for basically being Chinese. We saw the rape and murder of actual nuns after the fall of Hong Kong. Well, Japan now has a lot of territory to administer. We will see how it goes soon enough. They have now reached a bit of a roadblock, though, in their campaign to take the Philippines, where they've had the American and Filipino troops under siege at Bataan for over 2 months now. The garrison and refugees there are by this time on 1/3 rations.
Oh,
on the 11th,
hungry.
American Commander Douglas MacArthur leaves, though, and he hands over local command to Jonathan Wainwright on DC's orders. Well, sort of. More on that next week.
No.
He was going to leave by submarine, but he and his company leave Corregidor on 4 PT boats. On the 13th, as the week ends, they reach Mindanao. From there, he is to fly to Australia. MacArthur is a major hero in the U.S. now, and with ABDA Joint Command having failed, President Roosevelt and Army Chief of Staff George Marshall see the need to get him out of there and command the Allied armies in the theater. See, Australia is turning more to the U.S. since relations grew super strained with London a few weeks ago. Winston Churchill accepts Australian Prime Minister John Curtin's demand that Australian forces will only remain in North Africa and defend Suez if more American forces come across the Pacific to help secure Australia. That can only be guaranteed if the commander is American. The decision was already really made 2 weeks ago when MacArthur was ordered to leave the Philippines for Melbourne to take command of all U.S. troops. The Australians were not told of this, though, because of the danger in actually getting MacArthur out. On the 12th, American troops land at Noumea on New Caledonia.
Yeah, I'd say there's probably a bit concern of like, can we actually get the man out of there? He's kind of surrounded, and then he's got to fly. Like there was a big risk in getting him out.
To build a base and garrison the island. This landing includes the first Seabees that are out on actual service. The Seabees are naval construction battalions, and their name comes from the C and the B in construction battalion. The first project was building a fuel depot on Bora Bora last month, but their general mission is to build anything at any time under any condition. They are replacements for civilian construction companies in combat zones. Civilian workers resisting an attack can be classified as guerrillas under international law and summarily executed. And that's what happened at Wake Island in December. The Seabees are to do the same sort of construction, but to be trained and under the auspices of the U.S. Marines. In other naval stories this week, Admiral Harold Stark is to run U.S. naval operations in European waters. Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy, now will also have Stark's former job as Chief of Naval Operations from the 26th. And around Mediterranean waters, there's more news on the Maltese and North African situation. On the 8th, Churchill cables Middle Eastern Theater Commander Claude Auchinleck and asks him to fly to London to talk about North Africa. Auchinleck says no. He can't just leave his theater for days at a time. And anyhow, the Prime Minister knows his opinions, which we saw last week. The 10th, Churchill, now angry at the snub, writes again saying the government has no intention of allowing Malta to fall without a North African offensive to relieve the pressure. And that offensive must happen in time to allow a convoy to reach Malta in May or June. This telegram gave Auchinleck the chance of resigning or of obeying orders against his better judgment. In the end, he signaled he would comply with the government's wishes, but that success was by no means certain and would be neither rapid nor spectacular. At the same time, he asked the Prime Minister to confirm that the Eighth Army's main task was to destroy the enemy in Cyrenaica and not to create a diversion in order to help Malta. The somewhat mollified Churchill confirmed this belief.
Okay.
And with that, I will end this week of the war.
Oh, another
a
short
week that sees further Japanese gains in several places, the fall of Rangoon, and MacArthur heading for Australia. It also sees Emperor Hirohito concerned about how things are going to go in all the occupied territory. And I mentioned some of the atrocities we've seen recently, and you may be wondering what goes through someone's head when they're on the delivering side of such things, most of us not coming from such a background.
I think I was literally bringing that up a couple episodes ago.
John Costello writes about that in the Pacific War. And I'm going to end today by paraphrasing and semi-quoting him, okay? Japanese lack of respect for the lives of prisoners took on an extreme inhumanity when it came to military captives. Why is that? Well, drilled in Bushido, the samurai warrior code, the Japanese troops are supposedly trained to fight to the death for their emperor. This brings honor to their families. The instruction manual even says, bear in mind the fact that to be captured means not only that you disgrace yourselves, but your parents and family will never be able to hold up their heads again. Always save the last bullet for yourself. To many Japanese soldiers, to be taken prisoner is worse than being killed. Thus were the Japanese transformed into fanatical warriors who would rather die than surrender. This conditioning left the average soldier without any comprehension of Western ethics. He regarded all military captives as subhumans worthy only of contempt and treatment as slaves. Okay, there is that. But on
that thing just it still doesn't, because there is that code in a bunch, like in other places of the world. Like I don't know, it just that is not, to me, that has not been a good enough reason to explain why they are cruel.
On the other hand, we have seen the actual raping of nuns and the bayoneting, beheading, and immolation of medical doctors who are not military captives. Neither Costello nor anyone has yet to show me the part of the instruction manual about setting civilian doctors on fire.
Exactly what I'm saying, Indy.
Further examples of Japanese brutality can be found in our Season 1 Between Two Wars video.
And that was week 133 of World War II, March 13th, 1942. Tumbling capitals, MacArthur on the run. Yeah, another somewhat short episode, 15 minutes overall. I guess these were the long episodes of World War I, and now they are the short ones for World War II. But yeah, good episode. Nothing too much, but next one.